It is my pleasure to talk to you and teach you, these are supposed to be Bio 101s, about one of my favorite topics, cover crops. This photo on the right of this title slide here shows a sign that a farmer proudly is displaying that they're using cover crops and the cover crops are at work. This is a sign from a Practical Farmers of Iowa farmer. It's one of the largest NGO farmer-led research organizations I work with and some other folks have worked with in this room as well. My name is Marshall McDaniel. I am a Associate Professor in Soil Plant Interactions, and Emily's laughing at me because I messed up my title almost. And I'm going to talk to you about cover crops. But before I define cover crops, I want to talk about the problem that they're a solution to. And that problem in the sustainability world, I'm also a team member in the sustainability group, is that our current cropping system, corn, soybean agriculture, leaves soils bare for more than 50% of the year. And time, and I know it seems too early to get into philosophical thinking, and you probably haven't had enough coffee yet, but time we think of as linear, but if you look at a calendar or think of a year, it's more cyclical or circular. So I'm going to use this analogy of a clock with the months overlaid on top of where the hours would normally be to demonstrate how we leave soils bare or have a crop growing on them and how that relates to sustainability. All right, so bear with me here. That's the clock, and here now I've overlaid the seasons on top of that. And this is what our business as usual cropping system looks like. So this thin line is our soil. That's supposed to represent our soil. It's there year round, hopefully. We plant in around late April, early May, right? Then we have a crop growing there for a good amount of what we call the growing season, and then we harvest. And then there's residue on the soil. If we're lucky, we get some snow that covers the soil as well, might protect it a little bit. But during these shoulder seasons, where you see the little brown line, the thin brown line, we have three major symptoms that are not environmentally sustainable. These are the symptoms of the problem of bare soil. Rampant soil erosion, nutrient losses, and depletion of soil organic matter. Wendy brought this up in her summary. This is soil organic matter is just the living and dead decomposing organisms in the soil. 50% of soil organic matter is soil carbon. This is one of the major issues that many of us on the sustainability team work on. Not only do we have environmental sustainability issues, but some of these issues have actually been deadly. So I know we've got a lot of folks here from Illinois. Raise your hand if you remember this in the news from last May. Yeah, so a lot of people in the room here. So I think it was May 3rd or May 2nd, the conditions were right. There was a dust storm, soils were really dry, and a farmer was tilling their soil in May, a bare soil, and the wind caused a severe kind of blackout conditions car accident, and it killed 6 people and I think injured many other people. So this is really serious business. We all work on serious stuff in the CABBI team, but besides being environmentally unsustainable, there's life's at risk, right? And these are some more headlines from that. Okay, so returning back to our problem. You might be wondering, why are we talking about corn and soybean, which are the dominant crop rotations, the cash crop rotations in Iowa? Why are we talking, and much of the Midwest, why are we talking about this? Well, one of our CABBI crops, biomass sorghum, is also an annual crop. Its growing season is just as short, if not shorter, than corn and soybeans. So we might suspect that we have similar issues with biomass sorghum sustainability issues. However, I don't mean to be all doom and gloom. I'm more of an optimist at heart. We are also working on solutions to these problems, right? One solution is growing a perennial biomass crop. That's where miscanthus comes in. So now I'm showing that circle, but with plant growth. So miscanthus's growing season is longer. It's extended compared to those annual crops I just mentioned, including biomass sorghum. And it's dormant over the winter, which is that lighter blue color. I tried to use CABBI colors for these. And we harvest miscanthus in late winter, early spring. And we get many benefits. Those of us in the sustainability crew are measuring some of these benefits. I'm using a picture from Jared Flater sitting over there. He went out last January, and he took a picture at the Iowa State Sabre site, and there's miscanthus growing in the background, but in the foreground, it looks like a lot of soil, but what you might not be able to see is that there's snow under that, and we call that snert, soil dirt. And there was, I don't know, what do you say, Jared? There was at least 2 or 3 inches of our neighbor's soil caught by miscanthus on top of that snow. It's incredible. He took a video of it. I'm not going to play the video. I figured it would probably bog down the computer. So that's one solution, growing our perennial biomass crop, right, miscanthus. Another solution, and now we're getting to the cover crops, is using a winter cover crop. And we're testing this in Objective S1-1 in the sustainability team. So we're comparing sorghum with the bare soil in the shoulder seasons, late fall, early spring, with a cereal rye growing ahead of it, or behind it and also ahead of it. And the cereal rye goes dormant over the winter as well. It doesn't grow in our harsh winters, but it can survive and starts to grow again in the spring. That's why there's that darker green where there would be normally bare soils. So that is the solution I'm going to talk about the rest of the talk. And finally, a definition for you all. So cover crops are plants that cover soil rather than for the purpose of harvest. They are primarily used to slow erosion, improve soil health, enhance water availability, smother weeds, help control pests, increase biodiversity, and other benefits. Oh my, lots of benefits, right? This is a picture, this is a different project, not CABBI, but I do a lot of work with cover crops and corn soybean systems too, and a student of mine took this really nice photo looking down a row of corn with some decomposing cereal rye residue. I'll come back to why cereal rye is kind of the king when it comes to the cover crop kingdom. But cover crops are a multifunctional tool. That means it has many purposes, and there are many benefits to using a cover crop. And we hear about these benefits from farmers as well, from an anecdotal sense. Many of these benefits are well established, and I'll give you a QR code to links to papers. Some of them are less established or a little bit more debated, like in normal science. These are the soil benefits: decreasing erosion, increasing soil organic matter, soil organic carbon, increasing microbial activity and biomass, increasing aggregate stability, or the ability of soil particles to kind of resist erosive forces like wind and water. And then also people have documented weed suppression from using cover crops and pathogen suppression. There's a caveat to the pathogen suppression that I'll come back to in a moment. And then probably the best documented benefits of cover crops are decreased nutrient leaching, especially nitrogen, and improved water dynamics, improved infiltration, maybe even water holding capacity. So you might be asking yourself, why, with all these benefits, why aren't all farmers in Iowa or Illinois or Indiana using cover crops? So Indiana is beating us, both Illinois and Iowa. This is a paper from a colleague. He used some data records to estimate cover crop usage rates, and they range. The really light colored counties are less than 1% of acres are in cover crops, and then the darker colored counties are greater than 15%. Most of those are in Indiana. And it's a good question. Why aren't more farmers using them? And there's a few reasons for it. There's something that's real and been observed, including by folks here at University of Illinois. There was a nice paper published a couple years ago where they used satellite data to show that cover crops do cause cash crop yield drag, meaning it decreases the cash crop yields by 3 to 5% on average. And there's a few hypotheses or reasons why this is happening. One of them is what's called the green bridge hypothesis, and this idea is that the green cover crop actually acts as a carrier to bring diseases like Pythium, a fungus that causes root rot, over and infects the corn in the next year, and kind of it allows it to survive over winter. Another reason we think that there's yield drag is that cover crops are keeping the soil covered, but they're keeping soils cooler and wetter. They have a higher albedo, they prevent evaporation. Another factor that I've done quite a bit of work on is nutrient immobilization. So as cover crops have a wide carbon to nitrogen ratio, when they hit the soil, they create a demand for nitrogen by microbes, and microbes can outcompete plants for nitrogen. So plants usually end up being the loser, and plant growth is suppressed. So all those three factors are contributing to the yield drag. Farmers are also just busy, like you and I and everybody in this room. It's more operations. It also costs money. There's a lot of cost share programs and incentive programs to help farmers implement cover crops, but it is still time and money. And then there are cultural factors. There's some interesting papers if you want to know more about these cultural factors. I work with a sociologist, Jay Arbuckle at Iowa State. Farmers are pretty risk averse. I think most humans are, but some of the yield factors and worrying about what their neighbors think are all reasons maybe that they're not using them as well. However, the cultural factor can also is a double-edged sword. It can also be a benefit. So I'm going to pick on Iowa here. And if you look at Washington County, that's the highest cover crop adoption rate, somewhere between 10 and 15% or more. And people have often joked, what's in the water there? There's just been a big momentum of farmers, progressive farmers using cover crops, and also the neighboring county is in there too, Jefferson County, which is the one southeast. Okay, so back to my question I said I'd answer. Are cover crops a solution to all of agriculture's problems or a nuisance to farmers? Well, like most things, it's complicated. It's somewhere in between. I explained all the well-documented benefits to cover crops. However, there's a lot of barriers to adoption. Some considerations or things to think about in the future. Cereal rye is the most popular cover crop species, like I said, but people are looking at other species or even mixtures of species. There's a lot of things we still don't understand, like the genetics, environment, and management of cover crops. Crops like corn and soybean have a large head start on genetics and genetic improvement. And then we know there are benefits to it. We just need to figure out ways to remove barriers to adoption for farmers. Here's a QR code with my slides and any papers if you're interested in reading up a little bit more. If I don't get to your question, I think I've got a few minutes for questions. You can email me, and you can follow all the cool stuff the folks do in the lab if anyone's still on X or formerly known as Twitter. Thanks for your time. I'll take some questions.
Just a quick question. Why is cereal rye the popular cover crop as opposed to like an N-fixing crop that would help replenish the nutrients in the soil?
That's a fantastic question. The reason is because cereal rye is winter hardy, survives our winters really well. It produces a lot of biomass, whereas a lot of leguminous crops that would fix nitrogen, they don't survive as well and don't produce as much benefit, biomass benefit, right? The idea being the more biomass, the more benefits you might see on that Swiss Army knife. Good question.
Any other?
Carl's got one.
Thanks, Marshall. That was really informative. So you mentioned the cover crops can actually result in cooler and wetter soils. And I'm just wondering, every growing season, the crops around here, the annuals at least, start with soils at water holding capacity. And so wouldn't having cover crops with increased evapotranspiration during the fall and the spring cut into that? And so why wouldn't it result in perhaps drier soils?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carl. You're an A+ student, I can tell, in the Bio 101 class. So I simplified it a little bit, but we actually, I don't think there's been a lot of research on this, but I hear this anecdotally from farmers that the cover crop, I think it's if they get a good biomass, they could get a lot of transpiration, and they say they can get into their fields earlier than their neighbors. But then once the cover crop is terminated with an herbicide, then it creates that cover and prevents evaporation and might cool the soil when corn is starting to grow or right after the corn seed's planted.